Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. Over the decades, Marvel and DC Comics have stood as the two pillars of the comics world. Every so often their heroes would clash, team up, and overcome threats from each of their respective worlds. But today I begin taking issue with the epic brawl with both universes in the balance. DC versus Marvel. Or Marvel versus DC, depending on the issue. With writing duties shared by Ron Marz and Peter David, and art by Dan Jurgens, Paul Neary, Claudio Catalini, and Josef Rubinstein, it's a titanic clash of heroes and the occasional anti-hero, so let's slam our action figures together and see if this comic makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads. DC vs. Marvel #1's cover sees each publisher's characters corresponding to each other on some kind of rocky hillside, I guess, separated by a strange energy fissure. There's a mild spoiler to be had, as the opponents in the impending fight are parallel to one another.
The showdown of the century. It all starts here!
Unless we decide to have an exclusive #0 issue in a couple of weeks, and whether or not it'll actually affect the story in any way, it'll retroactively start there.
We open to a splash page of Spider-Man, thankful for a peaceful night in the Big Apple, and glad that he returned, even if it was under the name Ben Reilly, and sporting a new suit.
If you're confused by Spider-Man going by that alter ego, I'll sum it up as best I can. Several decades ago, there was a clone of Spider-Man that he fought, apparently to the death. The clone came back, and there was this big confusing kerfuffle. Was Peter Parker the clone, or was the other guy the clone? And who really knows what's going on? So anyway, Peter left with his wife MJ, while Ben Reilly stayed behind to act as Spider-Man.
And I think I'll leave it there for now, since my videos are long enough as it is, without trying to condense the Spider-Man clone saga. He continues to talk to himself out loud as his spider sense alerts him to an alley below, and a scruffy-looking gentleman leaning against a strangely glowing cardboard box. Beams shoot through the urban obelisk and pass through the webhead with no apparent harm, until he glows himself and vanishes. A passerby sees the light from the alley, and the scruffy dude is saying it's too soon, asking for the newcomer's assistance. But the kid wants no part of it, declining by way of showing his kung fu stance, and leaves like someone asked him to take a survey.
Look, it's one thing if you want to mind your own business, but light beams are shooting out of a glowing cardboard box in a random alley. At least have the decency to look more astonished than mildly inconvenienced.
Spidey awakens on a rainy rooftop and encounters the Joker, who had a run-in with the Peter Parker Spider-Man in a different crossover, which we'll get to later in the year. Though this being Ben Reilly, he doesn't recognize the clown. For Mr. J, the similar spider threads are familiar enough. They have a fun exchange about the spider's present whereabouts, and brother, it ain't New York. You are in Gotham, and if you don't know that much, you have a serious reality problem. And I would know.
Yes, we all know about their reality problems.
Joker had planned on blowing up the nearby building, but is kind of put off by the rain. Spidey responds by a sardonic fake laugh and demands answers. Joker hands him his business card, muses about killing the weatherman, and steps off the roof. Spidey panics and tries to web a line to him, but the clown just drifts away in a parachute, while the webhead looks at the playing card he just received. Not sure if a parachute would be that effective, but maybe they're higher up than I'm thinking they are. And wow, was it well hidden under his coat. But onto a different Joker card, one charged by Gambit and thrown at the Juggernaut. Weird how playing card designs remain a constant throughout the multiverse. While Storm readies some manner of weather attack, I assume, maybe covering the villain in morning dew, Marco is about to try flattening Wolverine when he glows and ends up punching the side of the Daily Planet. Since the building can't defend itself, Superman repays Kane in kind. The homeless man, Thor, who, for the sake of brevity, we'll call Patch for the time being, has, well, patched up the box. He feels it should hold for now and prevent any further crossovers. Oh, if the two of them get together...
Oh, what's the worst that's gonna happen? They find Adam Sandler and have him finance a mediocre buddy comedy? Wait, that is bad news.
Unfortunately, that's when his patchwork comes undone. Captain America is dealing classically superheroic lines while fighting Hydra agents, but vanishes before he can interrogate any of them.
Hey, Cap fighting Hydra instead of being Hydra. What a novelty!
Meanwhile, Wonder Woman saves an officer, who'd better watch where his hand reaches, from being crushed by a chunk of bridge. He thanks her and compliments her efforts since settling into Gateway City, when she's gone in a flash. Hulk is smashing up some firewood, but at this time it's Banner's brain in control, and his lovely wife Betty at his side. Then zap. Superboy is showing off to some shamelessly drawn bikini girls, living a superpowered teenager's fantasy until the arrival and angry jealousy of Tana Moon, a reporter that gave him a spotlight after his appearance after Superman's death, and his kinda girlfriend, or so I've researched. And because you can't have too many comedic cliches, she notes her occasional wish for him to disappear when he does.
Would a picture of him getting punched in the face make you feel better? 'Cause one of those exists.
After Lobo is transported out of an alien bar, preventing him from killing someone that might have insulted him, he thinks, the X-Men are conferring with Professor Xavier about his evil stepbrother's disappearance. Storm says he was struck by a shaft of light, but what the panel showed was more glow than gone. Anyway, while Psylocke watches from a story up on a banister, because saucy ninjas sit like that, I guess, Beast reveals his scans of the area reveal no match to any transportational or temporal signatures they have on file. In short, he's got no clue where Juggernaut went. While Wolvie is content to let the brute be someone else's pain in the neck, Aurora points out they can't let him stay missing. If we do, we are no better than Goddess!
Huh. Polytheistic deities have weird standards.
The very 3 X-Men that previously fought Juggernaut are gone, and the same happens to Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner, Elektra, and others, seen posing while outlined in glowing auras. Maybe they're all turning Super Saiyan. Anyway, Batman readies a Batarang trying to coax the release of Robin from the knife-wielding clutches of Bullseye, one of Marvel's deadliest assassins. He wants to know where he is and is less than intimidated by the Dark Knight. Fortunately, while the guy who literally put a target on his forehead is busy threatening and speaking in the third person, Robin elbows him in the throat and gets free. However, the killer is still able to catch and throw back the Batarang. Again, however, Bats proves faster than expected while punching harder than Daredevil to knock the stranger out. And his eyes turn red for some reason. Are we sure this isn't a hard-act duplicate? While glad his sidekick is safe, Pointy Ears takes a moment to chide Tim for taking such a risky move, before noting that their local rogues gallery doesn't contain a Bullseye, and it's a mystery how he got into the cave at all. And that's when Boy Wonder number 3 disappears, only to show up in a bedroom inside the base for the Team Generation X, met by members Husk and Jubilee. Jubes, were you expecting a boy to be delivered? Nope, but I like his fashion sense already.
And if he had arrived in the New 52 Red Robin suit, I imagine she would have rightfully run away in terror.
We see Superman flying back to the Daily Planet, so we don't get to see the outcome of his brawl with Juggernaut, sadly. And it looks like Four Freedoms Plaza is right next door. Anyway, he arrives as Clark in time for chewing out by the new editor, J. Jonah Jameson, who wants the responsibility of telling people about the wacky, glowy switcheroos going about. A mysterious publisher forced Perry White out, Steel fought the Absorbing Man, Jimmy Olsen's a TV reporter.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
It's a madhouse! Seriously though, how long has this been going on? There's no real sense of a passage of time, so has it been a few days or a few hours?
Also, I find it a little weird that Clark can tell Steele's opponent is some kind of absorbing man from a still photo. It feels like something of a stretch even for Superman. Well, he gets to work on his article about reality flipping characters like flapjacks by a drunken IHOP cook, including such inspiring remarks like, "Nothing is safe." Way to go, Smallville. Juxtaposed to this is the sight of heroes from one reality fighting the villains of another. And I guess Batman got sidetracked looking for Tim and is now dealing with Venom. Too bad we don't get more detail on some of these brawls, like Punisher and Deathstroke. Even heroes are fighting heroes, but some apparently are finding common ground. All the while, average citizens face the difficulty of everyday life, compounded by unknowable forces playing Go Fish with people and buildings. We see Supes battling a Marvel villain and Spidey taking down the Man-Bat, which is apparently a photo Clark is looking at, not recognizing the webhead. You may be asking, if Joker recognized Spider-Man from a previous Bat crossover, why doesn't Superman when they've met twice?
Well, the two previous crossovers between Superman and Spider-Man, one of which I reviewed earlier this year, occurred pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths, so it would make sense that Superman, or anyone else in the DC Universe, would fail to recognize the webhead. And while Marvel's canon remained unchanged from those crossovers to this story, the Clone Saga that would be the catalyst for Ben Reilly's existence started 3 years before the meeting of the Red and Blues, so he wouldn't recognize any of the Planet staff either. If I didn't know better, I would say the writers of this story planned it that way. Remember what it was like to plan things? Especially if you planned it competently.
Speaking of, Lois introduces Ben Reilly, who goes by the professional name Peter Parker, so Kent can call him that if he likes. And perhaps, the mild-mannered reporter ponders, they can work together to uncover the strange goings-on.
Here's an interesting question that's just been raised. How aware of this detail is Jonah, longtime employer and yeller-at of Parker? I mean, if he's seen Ben Reilly, then he knows he bears a more than striking resemblance to his classic photographer. Does he think one is the alias of another? Or because this is a new paper for Jonah too, has he just not gotten the chance to meet Ben? But I'm sure that this question would be raised if Reilly ever worked at, say, the Bugle in the normal Spider canon.
As Ben Pete considers that it'll take bigger forces than them to weed out the truth, two such entities, DC's Spectre and Marvel's Living Tribunal, sense the strange inter-universal disturbance, and can each only feel negligible by comparison, and the final page sees two cosmic figures, color-inverted designs of one another, looking like they're testing the effects of static shock. Afterwards, give or take some ads, are letters from a co-editor from each publisher, Mark Grunwald of Marvel and Mike Carlin of DC, then bios of the impending opponents, and a ballot form for readers to cut out or copy and send in to determine the winners, all revealed by issue 3.
Because if there's one level-headed mindset that'll look at the basics of facts without bias, it'll be a mass of comic book readers. Be honest with yourselves? That's what I thought. Of course, when this came out, if I had voted, I probably would have done the same thing. Voted for who I liked or was more familiar with, instead of contemplating their actual powers set against each other.
Of course, not all of these matchups are exactly sensible, but I'll get to that later. On to Marvel vs. DC issue 2, with a cover that sees the cosmic figures, more pastel-looking in the background, as it seems the primary fighters, and a few others, seem to be starting their rumble. The opening splash page is kind of like the world's most awkward selfie, a close-up of someone's face with the heads of the crystalline beings in his eyes. Narration states that Axel Asher...
Yes, that's his name. All I can say is, it was the 90s.
Anyway, he was 7 years old when he caught his little sister playing with their dad's gun, and got shot when he took it away, leaving him with a limp as he walks to this day. At the time, he was understandably angry at the outcome, and yet his sister was simply indignant about having the toy taken away. No kidding, narration says that's how the girl viewed it. Kinda weird to include that factoid, since I don't think they ever get into this traumatic event again. Axel's pain and animosity of that time pales in comparison to a sudden vision he has, and his sweaty stumbling catches the attention of an officer that asks him to step out of his car. Worried that he might be considered drugged out or crazy if he mentions two things fighting in his head, he tries playing it cool until another officer approaches, neither one recognizing the other and claiming they're in different cities.
Now, you might have noticed that most of the page had this kind of polished golden sepia look to it, while normal coloring switched between the two cops. And it kind of made like one was walking out of an old-timey movie. I didn't think anything of it when I was a kid first reading this, but now it just seems a little peculiar, but not necessarily in a bad way. I suppose it does kind of help emphasize that two different worlds are kind of crossing over to each other, but still a little odd compared to the modern-day coloring techniques I'm probably more used to. Stylistic color choices. What are you going to do?
Bursts of light, fake cops. It's like the whole city is going down the sewer. And apparently the sewers knew someone was thinking about them since they spit out Wolverine brawling with Killer Croc. And since we saw Wolvie vanish, it's safe to say they're in Gotham. Axel narrowly escapes a manhole lid that hopefully will be covered by his insurance, as we see Parker and Kent are on the scene, each thinking they need to find an opportunity to slink away and suit up. And wait a minute.
Okay, so if they're in Gotham, what's Clark doing there? Or did that Gotham get ported to Metropolis? We haven't seen people get glowed to different cities in their home universe, so I doubt that's it. Is it? Stop confusing me, comic!
Also, I found it odd that they seem to give Croc a white coat and pink or purple pants. Did the colorist confuse him for the Lizard? A rattled Axel is all set to take all the money from his checking account and get out of Dodge, narration saying he's always felt nomadic, always in search of some unnamed objective. However, when his card is rejected, he realizes his surroundings are unfamiliar, and not just because the big fight seems to have moved on, and neither cop seems present to, get him to somewhere safe at the very least. He does recognize a glowing alley and approaches, again encountering Patch.
What is that?
When there's a universe to save, you can't stop for exposition.
You, sir, have neither read comic books nor watched anime.
Elsewhere, Thanos delights in the potentially disastrous universal upheaval, well, with him being in love with death itself, but the arrival of Darkseid sees him cross his arms like he spotted another dude trying to bird dog his lady. Well, death, anti-life. Maybe his lady has a twin sister she never told him about. Anyway, we cut to Earth, where Captain America's latissimus dorsi are apparently inflated as he throws his mighty shield at Bane, but misses. We interrupt this fight to Wolvie and Croc crashing through a Warner Brothers store, just as a customer was having a funny discussion about the lack of X-Men stuff.
Wait, which one of these universes has X-Men merchandise? Because if it's Marvel, I think the Children of the Atom are due for some serious royalties.
Nightwing observes the fight from a nearby rooftop, thinking he may have to take them both out, given their savagery, and we see a hand charge a playing card. Also, this happens with Storm.
Goddess! No, Amazon.
Of course, nowadays, Diana would have to specify she was only half right. We return to Cap, about to get Bane's crippled bat special, while the villain boasts about how useless the stranger's about to become, only for his shield to plant his face into the concrete. I mean, there's no establishing shot for exactly where they are, but that's very clearly not dirt being broken. And this is Bane that stopped relying on his Venom steroid. And I noticed they forgot to outline his shoulder straps, so they just colored them in. But a small issue to the scene overall. Now, no more back talk from you.
Angry Spork approves!
Batman is tracking who I guess is the Lizard. I don't remember him having fins, but hey, I didn't collect Spider-Man around this time, so whatever. Or maybe it's a different Marvel character that Batman is just signifying as the Lizard in his inner monologue. When he sees Nightwing dodging energy projectiles, he prioritizes his first sidekick over a creature that's only surveying his unfamiliar surroundings. Back in the glowing alley, Patch mentions he should have recognized Axel earlier. Except he kinda did, so what the heck. And mentions that he is in fact sealing the box with duct tape, but apparently it's not enough, as the Old Man, Spectre, and the Tribunal all say it's too late.
Wait. Reality itself is collapsing, and duct tape isn't fixing it? Well, time to find a new universe. Preferably one where we have a competent president and Cassie Kane isn't screwed up. See ya.
Another scuffle ending off-panel, Nightwing mentions that the Cajun tagged him, and they were gone when he came around. Wait, Batman was seen nearby while they were fighting, so if he got knocked out, why is he explaining anything to Batman? In any event, their targets aren't as far off as they thought, as Gambit and Wolverine make off with the Batmobile. While Mole Man and his underlings peruse the Batcave, Bats reveals he let his car get stolen.
How can I arrest criminals if they don't commit crimes? I just bait them into stealing something so I can punch them into submission later. Bruce, I don't really think that's how you take care of war on criminal scum!
Actually, he just figured that tracking the strangers would help get a lead on Robin's location, even if his immediate threat is having his ears talked off by a girl that really digs his style. In a blinding flash of light that's seen by multiple heroes and some random disembodied heads, is Futurama's Head Museum missing any installations? Patch says that the job he's done for ages isn't enough, and the brothers have seen each other. Note the quotation marks. And when the narration boxes start looking like scrolls and the font shifts to something handwritten, you know it has seriously hit the fan. Apparently, a million voices as one dictate the story of the brothers, though they were technically also sisters, sexless, everything in between.
Though, for a description like that, they still look pretty masculine. But hey, let's just roll with it.
As the figures stare at each other in front of a lime everlasting gobstopper, and the spread is bordered by the heads of heroes and villains, the pair had previously taken to battle in eons past, because apparently there wasn't enough room in pre-existence for the both of them, and that ended and restarted creation in an explosion that created the multiverse, spreading fragments of their essence across creation. It took them eons just to remember they had consciousness.
At which point, they were no longer allowed to run for public office, direct blockbuster movies, write for Seth MacFarlane, or be in charge of comic book companies.
And they'd even forgotten about each other, until recent events. No longer were they me, but us, and their uniqueness was now in question, their previous battle having swapped the bits of one into the other's universe, and they want to be whole and unique once more. Fighting each other didn't work out, but each one still feels fundamentally superior to the other. Again, with people's heads and other people's eyes, does Visine not help with anything like that? Anyway, in observing their respective cosmic guardians, Spectre and Tribunal, they decide to have their super people fight each other, visualized respectively in the hands of the Universe Brothers, and taking into consideration that some of these fighters could tussle indefinitely without a conclusion, each pair will fight until one is immobilized, because even though these strange godlike beings have amnesia, they still keep up with Earth wrestling. The universe with the most victories wins, and the other vanishes forever. Should any combatants refuse, the brothers shall battle again, ending everything.
Marvel and DC being symbolized as people that resort to destructive conflict out of inflated ego while claiming to be the best despite obvious head trauma. That description certainly wouldn't fit anyone working at either publisher now, would it? Certainly no one in authority. Yeah.
This message was relayed to everyone in existence, and Patch explains to Axel that parts of the brothers lost in their first battle scattered into shards. Sometimes those shards became interdimensional gateways like the box, others became part of living beings. Such people tend to have varying states of self-awareness, looking to be part of something bigger but seldom finding it before going bonkers or self-destructing. But every so often, one becomes fully aware, like Patch, and now Axel.
Interdimensional cosmic shard powers activate! Comics have lied to me again! Anyway, it's finally time for the decisive bouts to begin. So...
Hey, brah, can I say it, please? Can I say it, brah?
Fine.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Okay, I'll give you that. That's a good Michael Buffer.
Though how do you work in those cheering sounds in the background? You know what? Never mind. Captain Marvel and Thor make formal introductions nearby what looks like a carnival in the background. And if you're perplexed by Thor's costume, remember what I said earlier. 90s. At a moment like this, there's only one appropriate thing for those possessing the powers of gods to do. And they do. They pray.
I've never been a big follower of either of these characters, but I still really like this scene. With the stakes as high as they are, with characters as powerful as these, they still take a humbling moment in a fight neither of them want. And it really reinforces just how terribly Billy Batson got retconned because of Flashpoint.
We pop back in with Thanos, asking his opponent Darkseid if he'd like to place a wager on the outcome of their battle.
I wager, you pale imitation of me, that you will lose.
Hey, in Jim Starlin's defense, while he was influenced by Jack Kirby's New Gods, his initial design for Thanos more resembled Metron. It was Roy Thomas that convinced him to beef him up. If you're gonna steal one of the New Gods, at least rip off Darkseid, the really good one.
Lois Lane is so distracted by judging people for placing bets on the literal battle for the universe, she gets grabbed by each reality's Scarecrow villain. Yeah, I was surprised Marvel had one of them too. What's weirder still is that it looks like the Marvel one recognizes her as a valuable hostage, with the DC one being skeptical. Shouldn't that be reversed? Well, anyway, Ben Reilly takes them both out in one kick, while making a TV show reference even fewer readers now would get than did then. Superman flies overhead, seeing that Lois is safe, but ponders if he should be jealous.
Why? You're Superman! You can't be that insecure about the one time you're not the guy saving Lois Lane.
Snapper Carr and I'm gonna say Hulk's buddy Rick Jones have each set up a booth at the carnival we barely saw earlier, taking bets on the Cap Marvel vs. Thor brawl. Speaking of, the Big Red Cheese thinks they should be finding a way to make the cosmic entities play nice, which again reminds me of what a goon his Flashpoint version is. The Odinson is in agreement, but reminds him that if they don't fight, there won't be enough time to do that since the babies would end up destroying everything. He offers to let the mighty mortal surrender, but Marvel opts to throw the unoccupied Ferris wheel like a discus. 'Cause, you know, Greek pantheon and all.
So, is no one actually in attendance at this carnival? If so, who are Snapper and Rick asking bets from?
Thor hammers the wheel back at Marvel, who was almost pinned had he not reverted back to Billy Batson, speaking his cleverness aloud. "At least your mortal identity is not lame of leg."
Remind me to introduce you to a kid named Freddy.
Something of a tongue-in-cheek reference to Thor's mortal host Donald Blake, a doctor that walks with a cane, and Freddie Freeman, a.k.a. Captain Marvel Jr. Billy tries summoning the magic lightning again, but since he's dealing with someone that controls such power, Thor interrupts it with Mjolnir, only to create an explosion that knocks both of them down, winning the battle for the God of Thunder somehow. Maybe Billy was down a second earlier or something. But losing his hammer, possibly short-circuited by the power of Shazam. Or Shazak in this case. Wherever it landed, it's found by Wonder Woman, recognizing its Norse design and reading the classic inscription. As she ponders the subjectivity of worthiness, she grasps the hammer and begins to glow.
Looks an awful lot like the kind of energy that's been transporting people between universes, but maybe by coincidence, the artists thought that this was the best color for accentuating her bust line. Which should be the takeaway from a scene like this, right?
Beneath the sea, another battle takes place, with different monarchs from different versions of the same kingdom sniping at each other. And rather humorously, too. We cut to the fight between Flash and Quicksilver, which causes a father-son-driven tanker truck to swerve off the road. Wally, that's right, not Barry, deal with Jeff Johns, saves the pair from an explosion, with Pietro taking advantage and pummeling him, though taking no joy in this kind of victory. However, Flash narrowly snatches victory from the mutant's brief hesitation. Aquaman, having been punched out of the water, lands nearby a seaside tourist attraction? I don't know, but no one seems to be reacting to him as he emerges from the water and is warned by a whale of Namor's approach. The Submariner mocks Arthur's kingly status and suggests he gives up to find an alternative solution to their predicament. Arthur ensnares his foe in the unbreakable line from his hook hand, and keeps spouting jokes to Namor's annoyance. He says it's to focus and keep his sanity, and then attains victory by whale crush. "That's your weakness, Namor! You're too noble to cheat!"
Outrageous!
Looks like he got Imperious wrecked. Yeah, I'm not particularly proud of that one.
At the Daily Planet, Peter Ben-Whoever is needlessly fussing over Lois, misreading her and thinking she's into him, when Wilson Fisk enters, revealing he currently owns the paper and fired Perry White. The final page of the issue sees the two bulking space despots, the Cosmic Brothers, Axel, Patch, and his box, and Diana being infused with Mjolnir's power.
I call her One Thor Woman. Now that I'm not apologizing for.
Afterwards is several pages of additional opponent bios, featuring characters we've yet to see fight, and those whose outcomes we've just witnessed. There's even a tally page to mark the victories thus far.
So far, the story has a suitable premise, one that in a lot of ways seems to mirror its target audience. Long have fanboys argued over one publisher being better than the other, and that's very much reflected in the brothers. They each feel dominant and special despite a lot of similarities between them. For all the silliness, it makes for a very interesting allegory, doesn't it?
Characters expositing to themselves out loud can feel a little clunky, especially since it's something that I haven't seen done in modern comics in a very long time, but it doesn't bother me that much. Though speaking of time, how it passes is very poorly defined and kind of mucks up the pacing. Clark writes an op-ed of questionable quality for an ace reporter, and scenes shown over that don't indicate if this is taking the course of hours, days, or weeks. Or heck, when did the Daily Planet get bought out? Though in a weird way, it might make sense for Wilson Fisk to jump on the opportunity to buy another realities business. Then there's some other little stuff, like the awkwardness of Nightwing's dialogue in regards to his unseen fight with Gambit. And just before then, narration notes how Batman had already lost a Robin this day. And that means not much time could have passed since he clocked Bullseye where other events seem to be taking place over the course of more than one day.
I really would have liked to have seen the Man of Steel, who's known to be vulnerable to magic, take on Juggernaut, who gets his power from a mystical gem. While there may be stronger people for Supes to fight, it was a missed opportunity that could have played up Clark's cleverness in battle.
The matchups we've been given so far have been pretty fair, and the fights went pretty well. The fight between Flash and Quicksilver seemed to end, well, quickly, but then again they are speedsters. And given no one else was actually at the carnival, I'm thinking Rick and Snapper were trying to take bets from each other.
As for the outcomes of the fight so far, they concern characters that I'm not into or familiar with all that much, so I can't say I'm offended by one or the other winning in any way. And I'd more want the victories to be based on the stats than popularity. Next week, we continue with the epic brawl of brawls, and then skew into something familiar but altogether different. I'm the Angry Spork, man, have I got issues.